The veterinary field for a long time now has been paying a lot of attention to behavioral issues with our pets, and that's really important. But I think we're still just realizing in the last decade or so the importance that behavior plays in the physical health of our patients, and particularly paying attention to the stress that our patients feel and how stress plays a role in their physical health. So today we're going to talk a bit about the role that stress plays in animal health and the role that environmental enrichment plays in preventing stress in our patients. So first, let's start off with looking at what stress is. From the Oxford Dictionary, stress is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. Kind of like attending BTI, right? You're in a very fast-paced program. There's a lot of information you're cramming in, so it can be stressful, right? And we know that stress in our lives can play a role in our physical health as well as mental health. And we're going to see in a bit here how that plays a role also in our patients. So, are there any benefits to being stressed out? There actually are. Studies show that mild stress in young animals can actually lead to improved problem solving skills. It can improve their adaptability to stressful situations later in life. And that's the big one, because if they can handle stress better later in life, then we're going to have far less of the physical effects resulting from stressful situations later on. And it can actually help improve resistance to disease. That all plays a role together. So, what are the downsides of stress then? Severe, prolonged, and repeated stress has a lot of side effects. Stress results in stimulation of hormonal, adrenal, and pituitary systems. And this is not something you have to remember, but just to help understand how stress actually has a physical effect on us. So, serotonin, noradrenaline, dopamine, and GABA are all involved in the development of fear and anxiety. And that dopamine in particular has been shown to enhance aggressive behavior and also lead to stereotypic type behaviors. So those are your OCD compulsive type behaviors, and to abnormal grooming behaviors. The hypothalamus releases corticotropic releasing hormone that stimulates ACTH, which releases noradrenaline and adrenaline. And that then elevates our cortisol levels. Cortisol is basically corticosteroids. They depress the immune system. And so here again is where that stress causing us to release a ton of cortisol depresses our immune system, and that can contribute to the development of diseases. So what does it mean for our pets? Chronic or severe stress can lead to all kinds of things. It can contribute to or exacerbate existing diseases like GI problems, dermatologic conditions, respiratory conditions, of course, cardiac conditions. We know stress isn't good for anyone with heart condition. In cats in particular, stress often leads to a lack of appetite, and this happens a lot in the veterinary hospital, where even if they're not hospitalized for not eating, they stop eating in the hospital. And a cat who stops eating for more than a day or two can end up with hepatic lipidosis, which you'll learn more about later. But that can be a very, very deadly disease for cats, where the fat infiltrates the liver and actually can shut the liver function down. It can lead to poor grooming. That poor grooming leads to all kinds of matting and skin conditions. In cats, stress is a proven factor in FIC, or feline idiopathic cystitis. So these are the cats that all of a sudden have dysuria, hematuria, crystals, and blockages without an infectious cause, so no urinary tract infection. And interestingly, the vast majority of the cats experiencing FIC are indoor only cats. It's very rare to see it in an outdoor cat. And so the theory developed that FIC was a stress related illness. And sure enough, when they started treating FIC cats with environmental enrichment, it was shown to decrease the recurrent episodes of FIC in those cats. Of course, we can have all kinds of behavioral disorders that come out of chronic and severe stress, from aggression to spraying, fearfulness, and anxiety. We can get repetitive OCD type behaviors like fly biting, self-mutilating, spinning, tail and flank sucking. You can see either increased or decreased physical activity. Typically, dogs will be increased with panting, pacing, nervousness, and cats will have decreased activity where they're just hiding, but we can have individuals within those species that will do the opposite. We can have a change in sociability. So the dog that's always been confident and aloof is all of a sudden clingy and not leaving your side, or the cat that usually loves to be with you is hiding. And particularly in indoor only animals that aren't provided any enrichment, they're going to become very, very sedentary, which leads to obesity, and that obesity leads to a variety of diseases as well. And in dogs, they've shown that chronic stress can actually lead to a shortened lifespan. So where do our stressors come from? Severe stressors early in life are going to predispose that pet to chronic fear and anxiety their whole lives. So examples might include that puppy that has to be hospitalized with parvovirus. We are poking them multiple times a day. They already feel like crud. They're painful, and they're in an environment that's very unfamiliar to them. So those puppies often hate coming to the vet the rest of their lives. We can have problems with animals that were abandoned by their humans, or when it says adults on there, that means their parents. So if they were orphaned very, very young, that can be a very stressful situation not to grow up with those parents. If they're abandoned by their humans, that can provide a major stress for them that's very hard to overcome later on. Being attacked by another animal, that can make them chronically fearful of other animals after a severe attack. Nail trims where you quick the nail and it's painful. This is particularly a problem in young animals under the age of socialization, which we're going to talk about in a minute. When you quick those toenails and they have a negative experience with a nail trim during that prime socialization period, you can create a puppy or a kitten that hates having nail trims their entire life. And so it's very important to try to avoid some of these stressors, particularly during that critical socialization period. And one of the biggest is just lack of socialization. So the person that gets a dog and it ends up being thrown in the backyard and never sees another human being, never leaves the property. The cat that's brought in as a kitten and never ever leaves the house. These animals have no adaptability to changing situations. They see one environment day in and day out. Their routine is the same day in and day out. So anytime there's a new stress, they just are not adapted to it. They cannot handle it. And that is far more often what you see when somebody adopts a dog and it's extremely shy and nervous and fearful of everything. A lot of people tend to say, oh, they were abused. Well, I guess in a manner of speaking, they were abused, but not physically. They were abused because they were not properly socialized. So far more often than a physical abuse, these situations with these terrified animals is that they had absolutely no socialization during the most critical time of their life. So where do all these stresses come from? The number one thing is the inability to engage in their natural behaviors. So somebody who gets a herding breed and they expect it to be a sedentary house pet. As you see in that picture, that's actually a Sheltie. People forget that Shelties are a herding breed. We've kind of bred them to be more of a house pet, but part of the reason they have a high anxiety is they're not being allowed to engage in the behaviors that they were bred to do. You get a working breed dog like a Belgian Malinois, and again, expect it to be a house dog, expect it to sit in a kennel all day while you're at work or sit on the couch while you're at work. You're going to come home to a house that's completely destroyed or a kennel that's completely destroyed. Their mind is constantly active. They were bred to be working all day long, and now you have them locked up with nothing to do. For cats, the inability to hunt is a big one, taking away that inability to hunt. Now, I'm not a fan of having them outside. I don't want them hunting. We've shown in areas with high populations of outdoor cats that many of the songbird populations are decimated by those outdoor cats. So I'm not a fan of that, but providing them some outlet for that instinct. It's a natural instinct to hunt. So taking away that natural instinct and taking away any opportunity for them to engage that prey drive can add stress to their lives. For cats, also climbing. Climbing is a big one. They like vertical space. That's where they find their safety. And so yelling at them every time they get on the refrigerator on top of a piece of furniture and not providing them somewhere where they can be up in a vertical space is going to lead to a nervous, fearful cat. For all species, foraging for food. It's not natural for an animal to just have food thrown in a dish once or twice a day. Most animals spend a large portion of their day hunting for food. In our pet birds, that can be as much as 80% of their day is spent looking for food. So we put food in a dish, they spend 1 or 2% of their day eating. What do they do with the rest of that 79%, 78, 79% of their day? If we don't provide some form of enrichment or ability to forage for their food, we can lead to all kinds of anxiety-ridden behaviors. And studies show that most animals, if you put food in a dish and you put food in a foraging toy, they're going to prefer to go for the food in the foraging toy. They want to forage. That's part of their natural instinct. For birds, sticking them in a cage and not ever allowing them any free flight. And a biggie is not stimulating all the senses. Imagine if you were placed in a bubble and you couldn't see anything but the plastic walls of that bubble. You were fed the same food all day, every day. It was super bland, looked the same, tasted the same all the time. There were absolutely no new smells. The food didn't smell, the environment didn't smell, no colors to see. You couldn't hear anything. There's actually been studies of people that I can't remember, they can't survive. Like within 24 hours, you get mentally ill if you are a hearing individual that's deprived of all hearing. So the importance of engaging all of your senses is a really big one in preventing stressors as well. And in zoo animals in particular, one of the things they focus on is choice. And so taking away our animals' ability to make their own choices with what they want to do each day in their daily activities is another source of stress. So providing them with lots of options, lots of different toys, lots of different places to sleep, places to climb, that's all very important for their mental well-being as well and to reduce stress. So should we try to prevent stress? Stress is unavoidable. We know that. It's a natural part of life. And as we talked about earlier, mild temporary stress actually has health benefits. It heightens our thinking and problem solving. Those releases of some of those hormones can actually have some positive health benefits. And particularly in allowing us to handle other forms of stress later on. So trying to avoid all forms of stress really means you can't socialize them. You have to just have them in that proverbial bubble. And so you're going to create stress by trying to avoid stress. So trying to avoid all forms of stress also means that patient has to be in that bubble, which means an indoor only lifestyle, and that promotes obesity. And obesity then promotes its own whole host of diseases. So avoiding stress really means no change ever. And there's no animal on earth, humans included, that are built for that. We are built to have different experiences, to engage all of our senses, and to not be able to do that actually provides a whole different type of stress. So how can we develop animals that can cope with and manage stress? And we're going to really focus here on that animal that we're getting in that critical socialization period that we can mold from the beginning. And that is the key, socialization, early and often. So introducing animals from a very young age to a variety of stimuli is going to help them become readily adaptable to all kinds of changing situations and stress. Now, for our puppies, that means 4 months. Their critical socialization window ends at 16 weeks of age. For kittens, it's even earlier. At 12 weeks of age, their critical socialization period is over. Now, let's add to that it's super important for them to stay with their parents. That is part of their critical socialization as well, for minimally 6 weeks and preferably 8 weeks. So let's say you get them at that ideal 8-week period of time. You have 16 weeks for your puppy to socialize them. That means realistically, you only have 2 months to properly socialize that puppy. And in your kitten, you have 1 month. 1 month to socialize them. Tough, yes. Doable, absolutely. If you have a plan and you engage in some form of socialization every single day with your pet, it's going to work fantastically and you're going to have a very well adapted animal. So a lot of people are deterred by the fact that these puppies and kittens are not fully vaccinated. I've actually even had shelter employees tell people, You can't take your puppy outside at all, not even in the yard. They have to potty in the house until they're 16 weeks and fully vaccinated. That is, pardon me, but BS. All you're going to do is create another whole set of problems by having a completely unsocialized animal. So I've had to undo that on lots of adopted animals that I've seen and told them absolutely not. You get that animal out, you take them to the pet store with you, you take them in the car, you enroll them in puppy classes, you get them to your friends' houses. You just have to be smart about where you socialize, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But you absolutely do not want it to deter you from socializing just because they're not through their vaccine series yet. Now, if you adopt a pet later in life that's very under socialized, unfortunately, you're never going to be able to completely overcome that fear and anxiety that they will have developed from being unsocialized. And these are dogs that often people, and cats, but more often dogs, that people adopt from the shelter saying, oh, I know they were abused because look how they act. They cower when somebody comes around and they shake in new situations. Well, some of them may have been physically abused, but the vast majority of them act that way because they were that puppy that was gotten on a whim and thrown in the backyard and never saw anybody. Maybe they've never seen a man before, and so a big guy's scary. It doesn't mean they were abused by a big guy. It just means they were never socialized with big guys with deep voices. And so these are the animals that are just fearful and terrified of every new situation. You can improve it. It takes a lot more patience, a lot more effort, and it's going to take a lot more time. And you can get them to where they're a little more comfortable in a wider area of their surroundings, but you're never going to get them completely over their fear of new situations. So let's look at the who, what, where, when, and how of socializing. Who? Everyone, everyone, all types of people and all types of animals. You want to pay attention to all ages of people. My own dog was gotten a little bit before COVID started. She was socialized a lot with teenagers, but my kids were all teenagers, so all their friends were teenagers. And when one of them started dating someone with a little brother, she tried to bring her little brother over, and my dog wanted to eat her little 3-year-old brother. Apparently, anyone under 3 feet was scary and deserved to be driven away. And so you really want to make sure you socialize them to men, women, toddlers, infants, seniors, people with disabilities. So socializing them around walkers and wheelchairs, canes, those type of things is very important. To individual people, to being around groups of people. As long as you can safely do so, all types of other animals. So puppy classes are the safest place to socialize your puppy. If you can find a kitten class, that would be great and a great way to socialize your kitten. If not, if you have friends with dogs and cats that would not also be stressed out by meeting a puppy or a kitten, and they are fully vaccinated and healthy, engage your friends' help in socializing your animals to other animals. What? Everything. Everything you can possibly think of. And you can find lists out there, checklists of things that you should socialize your animal to. Cars, car rides, and don't forget your cats. Get them in carriers, get them leash trained, get your dogs carrier trained or trained to wear a seatbelt in the car, but get them in the car, get them around traffic so they can hear the traffic noise, all types of environment, water, grass, trees, urban sidewalks, everything you can think of. Noises, super important. Now, you don't want to flood them with noises to the point where you're going to make them permanently afraid of noises, because again, just as it's important to get them very well socialized in a variety of situations, if you overdo it, you can make an animal that's going to be afraid of that their whole life. So you have to watch and pick up your animal's cues. But you can get CDs that play storms, and you can start them low and kind of inch your way up. You can um, have them listen to fireworks from inside the house. You can gradually crank music up. You can go to close to a loud festival happening in your neighborhood, but maybe a block away, and inch them closer, taking their cues if they're afraid or if they're excited about the noise, to try to get them over any noise issues. Now, huge one for cats is food. Now, some dogs too. I have clients whose little dogs will only eat people food, but it's far more important and far more prevalent in cats that they're picky eaters. They discovered in cats that they develop their taste and texture preferences by only 12 weeks old. So if you get one kitten food and you feed only that kitten food for the first 12 weeks, that's all they're going to want to eat. This is why you get a lot of adult cats that will not touch canned food. It's a texture thing with them. So I tell all of my kitten clients to not buy a case of food, to go to the store and buy as wide a variety as they can of different flavors of canned foods, different textures, different sizes, different shaped kibbles, the smallest bag of dry food you can get with different shape and sizes of kibbles and different tastes. And that's really, really important because if that pet develops a problem later on where they need to be placed on a prescription diet, I have way too many cats that absolutely will not transition to one of those prescription diets, and it could literally be life-saving for them. And so if we have socialized them to a variety of different foods, it's much easier to change their diet when they need to for their health later on. Grooming is another important one. As I mentioned earlier, we want to avoid adverse problems with grooming, so we don't want to force them through a brushing session or a nail trimming session, or you may have an animal that hates brushing and hates nail trims their whole life. But if you feed treats while you're nail trimming, brush with the back of the brush, make a game of it, you're going to have an animal that's much easier to groom. Don't forget to play with the ears too. You're going to have an animal that's much easier to treat the ears later on if you've played with them and cleaned them as a little puppy or kitten. And people forget about veterinary visits. These poor puppies and kittens, they come in and they're poked and prodded and they have a microchip placed and they have vaccines given to them and they're in the room and out of the room and back home, and we end up with animals that are afraid of the vet. Imagine instead that you invite your clients to just pop in with their puppy and kitten whenever they want, to get a treat at the front counter, to go sit on the scale and get another treat, to go sit in the exam room on the table and get another treat and then leave. Or maybe it's for the kitten, they get to play with the laser pointer and the feather toy a little bit in the exam room and then leave. If we invite our clients to do that between their puppy and kitten vaccine visits, we end up with dogs and cats that actually like coming to the vet. When we started even just doing something as simple as giving peanut butter with every visit, or spray cheese, or pill pockets, something that was a really high desirable treat with all the puppies, we ended up with dogs who year after year came running in the front door, would run to the reception counter and put their paws up, waiting for their treat there, would run into the exam room and put their paws on the exam room counter, knowing exactly where the treats were in the exam rooms. And they really, truly enjoyed their visits. And that makes you enjoy your job a lot more too. So it's really important to encourage your clients to think about socializing to the veterinary hospital as well, because that is a big source of stress for a lot of animals and leads to health problems for a couple of reasons. Number one, they come into the vet, they're stressed out. And that stress could lead to issues like them not eating for a couple of days after they come to the vet. But it also means the client has a negative experience, and then the client does not bring that pet in for routine care because they dread the visit. And so if we can make that positive, then the animals come in for their routine care much more often as well. Anywhere your pets are allowed to go. So again, in the car, make sure you leash train your cats. My cat is trained on a leash so he can go for walks outside. He's got a super high prey drive, so letting him go outside and look at the squirrels and the birds helps that a little bit. Car training, carrier training for cats is super important because going in the carrier is a very, very stressful thing for a lot of cats. Taking them into the pet stores, taking them to puppy and kitten classes, taking them to your friends' houses, wherever you're allowed to take them, take them. As we said, puppy classes are a super safe place. Studies show that they are at very low, if no risk. One study did about 20 different puppy classes over 5 years, and not a single dog ever was reported to have parvo or distemper from the puppy classes. So very, very safe way to socialize your puppies. Older pets, you can enroll them in a good quality daycare. For the juveniles, we don't recommend dog parks or areas in the neighborhood where a lot of unknown pets go, because those do have higher risks for disease. If you have friends that have fully vaccinated animals, as I said, engage them, and the veterinary office, as I said, make sure that you include going to the veterinary office. Every opportunity you have. Like I said, you have a very narrow window to get this done. So every single day you should tick off 1 or 2 things on your list that you want to socialize that animal to. But you want to make it fun. So if they seem overwhelmed, you need to take a break. So you can, if you're out on a walk and something scares them, stop, back off to where they're not afraid, let them investigate it a little bit, try again. If they're still afraid, turn around, go the other direction. If your puppy is getting a little bit crazier, they might be overwhelmed, or if they just go lie down and tuck their head under their tail, that may be a sign of being overwhelmed. So take cues from them and socialize, but make sure you don't push them too far, or you could end up with the opposite problem. Um, and socialize as soon as they're born. If you have an opportunity, you know, you're getting a puppy from a breeder, ask if you can come over and play with them. Ask the breeder if they socialize the puppies or kittens. Do they have children that can come play with them from the beginning? Do they introduce them to different noises and smells? So that can make a huge difference while they're still with the parents, to be also socializing them with people. Um, and again, preferably all this is going to happen before 12 weeks of age in a cat and before 16 weeks in a dog. How do we do this? Make a list. Make a list of things you want to socialize your pet to and try to check off 1 or 2 every day. Do it short periods of time so they're not overwhelmed or too frightened. Make sure that on your list you're engaging all of the senses of smell, all of your senses, sorry, different smells, introduce different foods, different scents, kind of keep a log on what your pet likes and doesn't like. Some cats love the scent of lavender, some hate it. Make sure that you are aware of what's safe and not safe. Cats can have very severe adverse reactions to getting into potpourri or to some of the essential oils that are diffused. So you want to make sure that you know what is safe and not safe. But providing all kinds of smells, different sounds, textures, tastes of things. So make sure you're engaging all their senses. And then keep in mind what their natural behaviors are and provide ample opportunities for that animal to engage in their natural behaviors. And that's particularly important with our exotic pets, but also very undervalued with our dogs and cats as well. Okay, so how do we prevent stress? Using environmental enrichment. First, let's look at what environmental enrichment is. Werble described it as one of the first to describe environmental enrichment, the modifications that act to enhance the level of physical and social stimulation that are provided by the captive environment. Now, this was really designed initially for zoo animals. How do we take a wild animal, place them in a cage, and try to stimulate their natural behaviors, keep them more physical, more social? And a lot of this developed because zoo animals were noted to have very stereotypical pacing behaviors, and things that obviously showed signs of stress. So a lot of this all started in zoo medicine, but fortunately is now really, really starting to be focused on in our companion animals as well. What do we look for in enrichment? There's a lot of different areas that we enrich. Social. So contact or non-contact. Maybe your animal needs some private time. So maybe if they live in a big group, they need some one-on-one quiet time. If they're an individual, they need an opportunity once in a while to socialize with others of their own kind. Occupational, again, super important for those animals that are bred to be working animals all the time. Things that are going to be psychological, puzzle toys, foraging toys, different forms of exercise, that type of thing. Physical, so how are we designing? In this case it says enclosure, but we can say our house. How is our house designed? Is it designed with a cat in mind? Is it designed with a Belgian Malinois in mind? Do we have enough size? Do we have enough climbing spaces? Do we have enough things to engage their senses in the environment? And that leads to the sensory, so making sure we have ways to stimulate all of their senses. And then nutritional, as we talked about. And that's not just what we feed, but how we feed. So allowing them to have that natural foraging ability. How do we start enriching? The first thing is to know your individual animal's natural behaviors and environments and try to recreate that as closely as possible. For dogs, that means knowing your breed and what they're bred to do and try to provide opportunities to do that. So for herding dogs, the ideal would be to actually engage them in herding dog trials and being able to herd other animals. But because a lot of it for them is just the constant mental activity, providing them constant puzzle toys can also help. But for instance, in vet school, my junior year, I adopted a border collie that was in for one of our teaching classes. She was likely a puppy mill reject. She had been bred several times by the look of it. She didn't know what a toy was, and never her entire life did she ever pick up a toy and play with it. And she was incredibly destructive the first 2 years I had her, my junior and senior year of vet school, to the point where I tried to rehome her so many times and could not find someone to take her. And then I got my own place, and the first thing I got was a fish tank, and it was a 55-gallon fish tank. I didn't want anything fancy, so I had a lot of tetras and mollies and plecos and things in the tank, just little fish. And my fish were always in about 5 gallons of that 55-gallon fish tank because my dog spent her entire day herding the fish. So if they tried to swim away from one edge of the tank, she'd jump up to the tank and growl, and they'd swim back to the other side of the tank. And eventually I got a bird and a rabbit and gerbils, and she spent her entire day going cage to cage to cage to cage, herding all the other animals in the house, and I never had a problem with her again the rest of her life. She was being engaged in her natural behavior. Again, as we mentioned, working dogs need a job. They make great therapy dogs to go visit all the time. They need toys that stimulate both the mind and the physical activity. Terriers have a huge prey drive, and they dig. So provide them a place in the yard it's okay to dig in. You can't stop the digging. Put them in dirt dog trials, that type of thing. Hunting breeds, make sure they have scent work and retrieving abilities. For cats, consider their prey drive, their need to climb, their toileting habits. They've done so much study on litter box habits. On farm cats, they prefer to defecate on one side of the farm, and they will travel 10 acres across to the other side of the farm to urinate. They don't want their litter boxes side by side, and they want at least two. So that's where we came up with the rule of one litter box per cat plus one. And they should be as far apart in the house as possible, because that is going to be what's most naturally stimulating to their habits. Scratching posts, of course, super important for cats to be able to have something to scratch on. Grooming is very important to them. So having the ability to, letting them groom themselves, having grooming stations where they can rub against things, scent mark things is very important. For birds, that means a lot of foraging, providing them all kinds of opportunity for foraging. And because birds are so intelligent, keeping things to occupy their mind, a lot of toys and changing the toys out frequently. Every species has their own behavior you need to consider. What is the natural behavior? What is the natural environment? And to create an environment as close to their natural environment as possible, and that engages as much of their natural activity as possible. How do we start? Change can be scary. So if we take an animal that's never had enrichment and we throw the book at them and we give them 100 new toys and 20 new litter boxes, and we're changing the toys every day, and I'm forcibly trying to play with them with 5 new toys, that alone is going to stress them out and overwhelm them. So you need to take it a little bit at a time. Follow your pet's cues, as we said before adding another item. Some items could be added right away and are not likely to cause a lot of stress. So just putting climbing places for the cats, extra litter boxes, scratching posts, for example. They don't have to use them. Don't force them to use them, but you can just provide them. But sometimes even just adding one new thing to an environment makes an animal super suspicious. If it's been a while since I've changed a toy out in my bird's cage, he leans away from that toy for the first day before he starts interacting with the toy. So I have to be very intentional about making sure I change out his toys at least every couple of weeks to keep him very socialized and very comfortable with a new toy in his cage. So some things might seem innocuous to you, but might be incredibly stressful to your animal. So if you try to put too many new toys in at once, like in my bird's cage, that he can't go anywhere. He can't get away from those toys. So that can be incredibly stressful to them. Bringing in a ton of new scents can be very stressful. Taking the litter box that's always been in the laundry room and all of a sudden trying to move it to a bathroom can be incredibly stressful for your cat. So be careful that you think through everything you're doing with the environmental enrichment with that animal. What benefits are we going to get from pursuing enrichment and making sure our animal has the ability to engage in all of those natural behaviors, has the ability to make choices about what they want to do each day, choices about their food that's enriching all their senses. Well, the biggest thing is they're going to be resilient in new situations, and new situations is where the stress arises. So if we have trained them to be able to handle a little bit of stress of a new situation and adapt quickly, then we're not going to have all the adverse effects that we get from stress. And that means they're going to be more resistant to diseases. So as we said before, the FIC patients have been proven to have fewer flares when we add environmental enrichment to their homes. Chronic upper respiratory cats have been shown to have less symptoms when we enrich their homes. We, in dogs and cats, are going to see a major decrease in obesity and all the diseases related to obesity. And a big one that people forget about is their senior pets. Yeah, they're just old, so they sleep all day now. Well, we shouldn't be letting them sleep all day. Some of the reason they're sleeping all day is because we're not providing them enrichment. Your senior pet still needs to go on walks. Maybe it's just down to the end of the block and back, or even the end of the driveway and back now. Or maybe you have to put them in a stroller or a wagon to walk, but get them out still. Still give them new toys. And sometimes their senses are diminishing, so you have to, get something that's really stinky to engage their scent. Something that's a little louder for them to be interested in, that type of thing. But don't forget your senior pet. And that's super important because cognitive disease, which is akin to Alzheimer's in people, has been shown to be able to be slowed significantly with just environmental enrichment and engagement of those pets. Same with humans, actually. So a few final considerations. All animals need regular veterinary care. So it's super important that they keep up to date on routine preventive care at all ages. And all pets that have symptoms of a stress-related problem need to be evaluated for underlying disease or pain. Pain is one of the biggest reasons our pets feel stress, and it's very underdiagnosed, particularly in cats. Our animals are designed to hide pain and not show pain. They don't yelp out unless it's a sudden, sharp pain. So those chronic pains, they're going to manifest by just slightly different body postures, not grooming very well, hiding, all the same things you see with stress, right? So an animal that is acting stressed first needs a full veterinary checkup to rule out any physical problems that we might need to deal with to help them overcome that stress. There's a lot of natural products you can advise clients to use or use yourself at home. For the animals that have stress, there are actually calming diets. Most of the major diet companies have prescription diets for urinary crystals that also have natural calming agents added into the diets. There's pheromone therapy for dogs and cat, dog pheromones and cat pheromones that have been proven to help reduce stress in the environment. There's a lot of nutraceuticals that you can use, like valerian, which is the flower that Valium is made from. So there's a lot of things that clients can safely introduce that are natural products that can also help reduce stress, but it doesn't replace making sure that they have their environmental enrichment in place. And finally, when we're dealing with a pet that has severe anxieties, severe stress problems, pharmacologic intervention is often necessary. You cannot overcome the fear and anxiety by simply providing enrichment or behavior modification if you don't first reduce the fear and anxiety. There's just nothing that's going to overcome it alone with behavioral therapy. So these patients very frequently need a full vet checkup, blood work, and then put on some type of behavior modifying drug. And then once they're on that behavior modifying drug, they will be much more able to respond to your behavioral interventions. So the key takeaway here is that any type of stress related problem in our patients needs to be started off with a full and thorough veterinary checkup, often lab work to make sure we're treating any other underlying problems, and to appropriately prescribe any pharmacologic intervention that they might need while we're working on all of the environmental enrichment and stress reducers. So that is just a very brief introduction to enrichment, to behavior, to socialization. There's a lot more references for you out there. You know where my office is if you have any questions. But hopefully that will give you a much better understanding of why this is all so important in veterinary medicine, because this is truly, truly not just their mental health. It is also a huge contributing factor to their physical health as well. Thank you.